Greetings and welcome to the Peace Operations Training Institute's webinar series. We are committed to bringing essential, practical knowledge to military personnel, police, and civilians working toward peace worldwide. To explore all the e-learning training programs offered by the Peace Operations Training Institute, you are invited to view our website at www.peaceopstraining.org. The Peace Operations Training Institute would like to thank the nations and the ministries of foreign affairs that provide the support so essential for the success of our webinars and all the programs we offer. These are Australia, Canada, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. In this webinar, Dr. Harvey Langholtz, the Executive Director of the Peace Operations Training Institute, interviews Colonel Christopher Holshek, Army of the United States retired, former Civil Military Liaison Officer to the UN Mission in Kosovo, Chief of CIMIC at UNMIL, and co-author with Cedric de Koning of the course United Nations Civil Military Cooperation.
Greetings. I'm Harvey Langholtz, Executive Director of the Peace Operations Training Institute, coming to you today from our POTI headquarters in Williamsburg, Virginia, in the United States. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this installment in our live webinar series. Here at POTI, we always strive to bring our students the latest, most up-to-date, and current information on peacekeeping, conflict resolution, and related topics. And to that end, we are pleased to host this live webinar. Several times each year, we will present to you, our students, one of our course authors, or other key actors in the peacekeeping field who will discuss a specific topic related to peacekeeping. And they will also answer any questions you may have about the topic. If you would like to submit your questions during this live webinar, either through the chat room or by email, please view the instructions at the bottom of your screen. Today, we are pleased to have with us as our webinar guest, Colonel Chris Holshek. Colonel Holshek, U.S. Army retired, has 3 decades of civil military experience at the strategic, operational, and tactical levels, including in the planning and deployment of civil affairs forces in the Balkans in the mid-1990s, as the KFOR's Civil Military Liaison Officer to the UN Mission in Kosovo, and most recently as Chief of CIMIC at UNMIL, Liberia, 2008 to 2009. He has had significant input to the development of policy and doctrine for NATO CIMIC, U.S. Army Civil Affairs, and U.S. Joint Civil Military Operations, as well as the UN CIMIC policy. He has contributed to development of a DPKO integrated training service program on UN CIMIC, as well as the Africa Center for the Constructive Resolution of Disputes Accord, revision of the Civil Military Coordination in UN and Africa Peace Operations Handbook. His blogs can be read in the Huntington Post. Of course, Colonel Holshek comes to us today as the co-author, along with Cedric de Koning, of the course United Nations Civil Military Coordination. So, Chris, very good to have you with us.
Very good to be here today, Harvey, and thank you very much to you and to everyone out there for this great opportunity. I'm particularly thankful for the opportunity to work with Cedric, who is one of my great friends and partners in this business, on the revision of the UN CIMIC course to produce something that I think is going to be extremely useful to the greater civil military community that works in the multinational and UN levels around the world. So I really, really look forward to this opportunity today.
Well, thanks, Chris. It's very good to have you with us. Would you like to give a little more background to the course now, or are you ready for the first question?
Well, I'd like to go ahead and talk a little bit about the new course that we've developed. The first thing I think that's really important to understand is that this is based on a concept of civil military coordination that has evolved over about the last 10 years, since about the time of the Brahimi report, when it was determined that basically one of the things that had to happen with UN peacekeeping operations is that they just had to work together better, all the different components, civilian, military, police, and with all the other partners, both internal to and external to the mission. So we first had was the idea of civil military coordination, or CIMCORD, in 2002, and that developed eventually into the humanitarian civil military coordination concept known as CIMCORD by OCHA, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Activities, which is headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. DPKO, which of course is headquartered in New York, in the meantime realized that there needed to be a sort of whole of mission understanding of civil military coordination, particularly for the military forces, which come from all kinds of different backgrounds and all different levels of experience, to have some kind of a baseline or common denominator approach to civil military coordination. And that resulted eventually in the UN CIMIC policy of 2010, upon which a number of different training vehicles have been and are being developed. And I'm very, very happy and privileged to be involved in that. The first, of course, which is related, not a DPKO effort, but related, is, of course, the POTI course, which is sort of the introduction to UN CIMIC. And then the effort that you mentioned, Harvey, that DPKO is undergoing to provide training modules to troop contributing and police contributing countries to UN peacekeeping missions, and that should be all out probably early next year, as well as, of course, very, very good handbook, which can now be based on this UN concept of civil military coordination, which goes across the entire spectrum, as the Capstone Doctrine says, the entire spectrum of peace and security activities. So the UN CIMIC course here is based upon those two documents more than any other, the UN Capstone Doctrine and the UN CIMIC policy.
Well, thanks very much, Chris, for that introduction, and thanks also for mentioning the UN Capstone Doctrine. And I remind everybody that we also have a separate course on that topic written by General Robert Gordon. Yes, it is. Thank you. We have several questions that have arrived, and I'd like to read these to you, Chris. So here's the first one, and this first one is from Mike Fiaffer of Ghana, and he writes as follows. Civil protection has been an integral part of humanitarian crisis response. In the recent post-electoral crisis in Côte d'Ivoire, it was almost impossible to effectively protect civilians since the peacekeepers were not resourced to provide safe havens. Some IDP camps were not even spared from attacks. In your opinion, what are the likely measures that can be taken to enable peace support operations to provide the necessary protection to civilians in armed conflict areas? What should the limits be in relation to provisions of this protection of the rights of citizens to demonstrate and protest? And is it feasible for the peacekeepers to be empowered to provide a no-combat camp or area or zone to protect civilians?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to be understood, and this is fairly well explained in the course, is that with respect to UN CIMIC, it needs to be understood that the protection of civilians, which is extremely important and runs across, again, the full spectrum, is sort of whole of mission effort. And it's really led by the civilian component of the mission, not the military. In fact, the police actually have a more direct role in direct protection, the safe havens and things of that nature. So it needs to be understood that the military's role here is more supporting and indirect than direct and so on. If we look at the principles of UN CIMIC and you understand that the idea of UN CIMIC is to place the military sort of further and further to the rear in a more supporting rather than implementing role in activities like the protection of civilians, and you get the right alignment. So that's the first thing you need to understand is you've got to get the right alignment. Now, what UN CIMIC can do in all of these, and again, protection of civilians is not a direct UN mission, but a supporting mission through mission and community support activities, which are very well explained in lessons 6, 7, and 8 in the text. Through liaison, information sharing, risk assessment, overall coordination, understanding that the main partner for the military, and particularly the UN CIMIC officers, is UN Civil Affairs in the protection of civilians. Other things that the military can provide, of course, is logistical and other support, intelligence, things of that nature. Support to communications to local population, and again, a lot of that is explained in lesson 9. And then, of course, protection of civilians is linked to both DDR and SSR, and that is demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration, and of course, security sector reform. So it really goes to say that if you're going to be trying to tackle these problems, you should look at each of every one of these issues within the context of this greater complexity, because the answers are not always, and in fact, more times than not, they're not military. But the military has a supporting role in each of these. So resist the urge or the temptation, and we know that in the military this is a great temptation, to try to fix the problem or solve the problem yourself, because we're sort of action guys. We like to take these on. Resist that temptation, work by, with, and through those partners, and take a more comprehensive and collaborative approach to protection of civilian problems.
Well, thanks for that. I'm going to read the next question now. And actually, we received several questions relating to the topic of winning hearts and minds. So I'm going to run together, combine 2 questions on that same theme. This first question is from Ms. Pauline Stefano Wan from Switzerland, but currently serving on UNMISS, UN Mission South Sudan. And the question is, I have a question on chain of command and military mindset. Decisions seem to take place without any civilian considerations, and the military mindset is ruled by military objectives. There is a huge need to win hearts and minds. For example, a military mission trucking IDPs, internally displaced persons, back without consultation with humanitarian actors and not even knowing the principle that military assets and interventions are used as last resort in a humanitarian emergency. And I'm going to merge with that the straightforward question from Major Edargo Villeches Jr. in the Philippines. He asked simply, is winning the hearts and minds of the people a concept that has a place in UN CIMIC?
Well, Poland and Edargo, that's a really excellent question that goes to the heart of a lot of an understanding of what UN CIMIC is. And UN CIMIC simply does not encourage this sort of winning hearts and minds approach. And one of the reasons is simply because there's a great deal of evidence out there that winning hearts and minds is just basically counterproductive. It tends to be very short-sighted, very tactical in its approach, and UN CIMIC is actually much more strategic. So, first of all, it's important to understand that the UN CIMIC concept is not particularly fitting for this approach to winning hearts and minds. Winning hearts and minds encourages dependence, and UN CIMIC is really all about trying to encourage greater independence from the intervening military. The UN CIMIC concept promotes this transformation management through what is called civilianizing and localizing processes to work the military essentially out of a job. And we also know that winning hearts and minds approaches tend to cause a great deal of friction, especially with civilian partners, and especially as mentioned in Pauline's question, the humanitarian actors. So UN CIMIC does not encourage winning hearts and minds. And if there's any winning hearts and minds to be done, and sometimes, as mentioned, that the military must be used in last resort for humanitarian activities and so on, any winning hearts and minds has to be done with a view to winning those hearts and minds, not for the force, not for the military, but for the larger UN mission, for the larger peacekeeping community and peace building community that's there. So you're trying to maybe open up some space to introduce those actors so that they can then take forward that mission and therefore lessen the dependency on the military. But be very careful when applying winning hearts and minds. Again, thanks a lot. That's a great question, Pauline and Edgardo, to ask.
Well, thanks, Chris, for that. Continuing with the questions. This next question comes from Jacques de Vasselot. I'm not sure he's from France, from NATO, but currently in North Carolina. But wherever you are, I'll read the question. And actually, I'm going to condense it a little bit and paraphrase it. He says, I have been working in the CIMIC domain for several years in uniform. According to current doctrine, a CIMIC is a military tool in the hands of the military commander to achieve his or her military objectives, whereas the comprehensive approach is an instrument in the hands of the international community to achieve the international community's objective. This makes quite a huge difference, and according to me, it is good that this difference exists and that CIMIC specialists do not feel frustrated by remaining what they have always been, military specialists. But he closes by saying, the military have to keep in mind that in almost all operations today, they will have to contribute to something that is much larger than them and led by a designated overarching organization, probably the United Nations, that will coordinate the actions of the several instruments of power involved in the comprehensive approach framework. The military will be placed in a supporting role and not anymore in a supported one.
Well, Jacques, I think your question is most appropriate. And in fact, I couldn't agree more with what you say there in the last part of your question and your comments, because that is exactly where UN CIMIC is. In many respects, UN CIMIC is already in the kinds of places that the NATO comprehensive approach is trying to get to. And I think it's good that we got this question from Jacques, because what's really important to understand is, and at the beginning of your question, Jacques, you had said something according to the doctrine. Well, according to NATO doctrine, perhaps, and according to the doctrine of countries like the United States, that CIMIC, or civil military coordination, or civil military operations, are commanders' missions or military missions. The difference in UN CIMIC is this. UN CIMIC is not a military mission per se. Of course, it's a tool in the toolbox, but it's a tool in the toolbox for the entire mission under this larger rubric of military coordination. So the major difference between UN CIMIC is it's not about how to support the commander's mission, that is a sort of command and control system, but really more how to facilitate the commander's support of the overall political military mission, which Jacques very, very nicely lays out there in the last part of his comments. So this tool in the toolbox needs to be viewed not just from the military perspective, but also from the civilian perspective of how we've explained it to civilians and why understanding UN CIMIC is important for civilians and, of course, even for the police components of a mission, is because UN CIMIC is the way. It's one of the tools, again, in this larger mission coordination toolbox, but it's the way that the civilian component in particular can leverage the capabilities of the military to further the overall mission. So that makes UN CIMIC an inherently strategic and not an operational or a tactical concept like NATO CIMIC or like U.S. civil affairs or civil military operations. And that's all outlined, in fact, very, very nicely, I think at least, in the principles of UN CIMIC discussed in Lesson 1. So, Jacques, thanks for that great question.
Yes, and thank you, Chris. I'll go on to the next question here. And this question is from Amos Arumba in the procurement section of the UN security force in Abe. He's from Uganda. He's in Entebbe, Uganda, and he asked the following question. I would like to know more details about the civil military course. How can I get admitted? How long is the course? Tuition, if any? Method of training, such as online or in person? Chris, if you don't mind, let me take that question and answer it.
Yeah, and Amos asks a really good question there, Harvey, but I think this is more in your area than mine.
Yes, and I'm happy to answer. So in order to enroll for anybody, you start out at the same place. Everybody in the world, go to our website, www.peaceopstraining.org. And if you forget the URL, you can probably go, Google or go to your search engine and just insert peacekeeping training and you'll find us. From there, everything will be clear. You can enroll, and even before you enroll, you can look at our different courses, you can look at our videos, you can look at our archived webinars, you can become a student and have your own student classroom, and although we're talking today about the CIMIC course, and this applies to the CIMIC course, we have 3 courses that are available for free, no tuition, worldwide. Anybody may take them, and those 3 courses are one I referred to earlier. It's our most popular course, Principles and Guidelines for UN Peace Support Operations by Robert Gordon, and then 2 more on the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1325, one in Africa and one for Latin America. So, and to answer your question, Amos, anybody in the world can go there. As for tuition, for you, Amos, it's no charge if you're in the military, police, or gendarmerie from Africa. It's completely funded by our funding nations who were listed earlier in this webinar. And these are also available at no charge in Latin America. And I should point out our courses we have 25 of them in English, 19 in French, 18 in Spanish, 4 in Portuguese, 3 in Arabic, and we make these available worldwide. For people who are not funded, not in the from Africa or Latin America, and therefore not funded, there are various other programs. People on UN missions get a reduced tuition. NGO employees get a reduced tuition, students get a reduced tuition, and even for everybody else worldwide, the tuition is quite low. We try and make them affordable. So the answer for anybody is start out with our website right there. Let me go on to the next question now, and this question comes to us from Bangladesh, from Lieutenant Colonel Salim Aman Khan. And let me take a moment to express my condolences and sympathies. We've heard, of course, about the fire you had there recently, and we wish you well and understand you have our sympathies there. But Colonel, you have submitted 6 questions. Quite a lot, but let me pick 2 out of those 6. So the first question you asked is, why is the military not allotted with funds to undertake CIMIC projects as well as QIPs, QIP, that's Quick Impact Projects? And then your other question, I'm going to select one of the other out of the 6. Do you think that the UN should request TCCs, PCCs, that's troop contributing countries and police contributing countries, to contribute dedicated CIMIC units for more visible CIMIC projects, as well as to undertake QIPs, QIPs in the UN mission area?
Okay, so we're going to answer each one of those one at a time, or? Well, I'll tell you what. I'll take them both on. How's that? In the interest of time. First of all, Salim, again, my condolences as well. Dundabat for your wonderful questions. They were very incisive, and it was hard to pick just 2 to take a look at. Let's understand what QUIPs really are, if I may. Quick Impact Projects is what we're talking about. Now, there is, in fact, an entire lesson in this text, in this course, on project management. That's lesson number 8, if I'm not mistaken. And in there, we give a very good description of the approach for project management and, in fact, how UN CIMIC supports QUIPs. But I think, again, it's important to understand as with UN CIMIC, that QUIPS is a mission tool, not a military tool. So it's really not necessary or even desired, actually, to have funding controlled directly by the military. That kind of encourages the military going out and doing their own thing, which is not necessarily a good thing. We want to work under this larger rubric of mission coordination in a collaborative and comprehensive way. So, and again, if you look at the principles of UN CIMIC, one of those, which is practically the most important, is the primacy of civilian authority. So QUIPS mission, QUIPS programs, QUIPS projects are administered under the civilian component of the mission, under civilian leadership, and therefore administered by them. It's important to, again, understand that the military has a supporting role. The military actually plays a very important and central role in QUIPS and project management in general. And again, that's discussed in Lesson 8. There are two mottos that I'd like to draw out that come into particular play here. One is, with any project, with any CIMIC activity, it's not about us, it's about them. So the projects really need to be, as with the principles of peacekeeping, encouraging local ownership. The other is that their game is our game plan. So when you start out with even the assessment portion of your QUIPS, that assessment needs to be the assessment of the people who are ultimately going to own this project, ultimately going to own this process at the end of the day. So again, we incorporate this process of civilianizing and localizing. Civilianizing means to work by, with, and through those other external partners in the mission and in the different components, different agencies aligned with the mission, and then to localize the control of these activities through helping the capacity, build the capacity of the local government, the local entities, the local communities in particular, and this is a community level project, to essentially sustain these efforts. Because one day we're going to leave, so as we point out, it's the famous Chinese saying, you know, it's about teaching them how to fish and not giving them a fish. And even invoking a little bit of T.E. Lawrence, who tells us and reminds us that this is not our country and our time is short. So we have to work very hard and very purposely in order to create projects, introduce projects that are not only going to help things better for people at the community level, but enable them to take more and more control over their own futures. With regards to the other part of your two-part question, no doubt the troop contributing and police contributing countries should develop their own organic civil-military coordination capabilities, or UN CIMIC officers. And the UN CIMIC course does a pretty good job of explaining that and training those people. You could actually start with this course and you get pretty much the brunt of it. In point of fact, if you look in the terms of reference that we suggest in Appendix E, you'll see those for various key roles of UN CIMIC officers, all the way from the operational or force headquarters to tactical or battalion level. So absolutely there should be CIMIC officers in the military. We suggest that it isn't necessary to have a separate CIMIC expert in the police forces, but there should be officers on the police staff to include the force police units who have some understanding and knowledge of UN CIMIC and know how to work within that system. So again, Salim, Dundabat for your question, and again, my condolences.
Well, thanks for that, Chris. And yes, I completely agree with you. It's not us. It's not about us. It's about them. Absolutely. And here's another live question submitted during this live webinar. This is from Ms. Ngua from Côte d'Ivoire. She's a student here at POTI, and she has the following question. I have no knowledge of CIMIC, but this concerns me. Is it possible that the military can work within society organizations and vice versa? How can it be done? And again, this is Ms. Ngua from Côte d'Ivoire.
Well, Ms. Angua, merci beaucoup. Thank you so kindly for this wonderful question, and I hope things are going better out for you all in Cote d'Ivoire. I know you've had a bit of a rough patch there in the last few months, but I'm rather hopeful, and it's because of people like yourself that are helping to build the future out there that there's a great deal of hope for what's going on in Cote d'Ivoire. I, of course, work right next door in Liberia, and of course, the face of all those countries are linked together. And that kind of leads me to the answer to my question, and that is absolutely. If you understand that, in particular the case of UN CIMIC, the whole idea of UN CIMIC is it's the exercise of the democratic principle of the civilian control of the military and of the military working within civil society, in support of civil society. Not so much civil society working within the military, I wouldn't say that, but certainly understanding that the military really deserves to be part of civil society if the relationship between the military and the civilians, that is the civilian-military relationship in any society, is a democratic one. So if we work towards that, and that's exactly what UN CIMIC tries to do, is to work towards a more democratic approach to how the military works with civilians, then I think we're really getting somewhere. So it's important, like civilians like yourself, to have an understanding of this, as I explained before, because it's the interaction between civilians and military isn't just something that needs to be understood in greater detail by the military component, but by the civilians who really should understand how to work with and make sure that the military is supporting that democratic civil-military relationship. So again, merci beaucoup for your question, and the best of luck.
Well, thanks again for that, Chris. And now we'll go on to the next question. This question is submitted by Ms. Amadou Halima. She is with the West African Network for Peace Building and the focal point in the Niger Republic for Gender and Gender Promotion Secretary. It's kind of a long question, but I'm going to paraphrase it here. And she writes, she says, how are you? How's work? Thank you for your hard work. And she says, according to you, how should the relations civilian-military in terms of human rights defense be? How should the human rights defense be? Is it possible to have a joint training of civilian and militaries? I'm asking these questions because I have attended the 2005 at the Kofi Annan Peacekeeping Training Center in Accra, the course Observation Election, and we were trained by police officers and soldiers. We were civilians learning and to be human rights defenders. And then in 2006, I attended another training course in Germany in the United Nations Center in Hammelburg. We were trained by German soldiers. We were only 2 African women among Europeans to attend this training in Hammelburg, Germany, Cape Verdean girl, and myself from the Niger Republic. And she says, since this training, I want to perform my knowledge to be a peacekeeper, but I don't know how to. Please tell me more.
Well, Amadou, again, merci for your question, and I hope those people in Hammelburg, Germany learned as much from you and other ladies from Africa as much as you had learned from them, because that's very important. It needs to go both directions. So your question actually is a perfect a continuation of the question that was just asked. And again, if you understand that the UN CIMIC approach is really about the application of the democratic principle of the civil-military relationship, then you understand the context in which UN CIMIC should take place. That understood that it's a whole-of-society approach to civil-military coordination, not just whole of mission, but whole of society, then quite naturally, things like gender mainstreaming, things like the mitigation of sexual and gender-based violence, things like human rights are all part and parcel, are all integral to the approach to UN CIMIC. And regardless of what's going on, whether you're talking about protection of civilians, whether you're talking about mission support, you're talking about community support, any kind of CIMIC activity should take this into place. And in fact, I've been a great proponent of not of gender mainstreaming as part of CIMIC. And in fact, just a quick little story, when I was the commander of the first U.S. CIMIC or Civil Affairs Battalion to go into Iraq, 28 of my 141 soldiers who went with me into combat were in fact women, and they performed brilliantly. So gender mainstreaming should be very much part and parcel of CIMIC, and your UN CIMIC officers should have a very high content of women because they work these issues in many ways far better and far more in a far more representative fashion, certainly than the men, and the men can certainly learn a lot from them. So there's an awful lot to learn. I certainly recommend this course to you. I think it would help you a lot. I think the course on the on the capstone doctrine, that is a free course that POTI offers, would also be extremely helpful to answering your question. And I think it would go a long way. I think once you've done these two courses, in fact, your partners at places like Kofi Annan Institute will have as much to learn from you, and in Heidelberg, as much to learn from you as you had from them. So best of luck, bon chance. And again, Amadou, thank you so much for your question.
Well, thank you, Chris, for the answer to that and answering all of these questions. We do have other questions backed up. I apologize, we're not going to be able to get to all of them. But for those of you who did not have your questions read on the air, please look on the bottom of your screen and look on our website, and you will see we have the opportunity for you to submit your questions to course authors and others. And you submit them by email, and we're happy to pass those questions along and then pass the answers right back to you. There's no cost for this. We're not for profit, and we're happy to provide this free service. So, Chris, as I said, that's all the time we have for questions, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to sum up or have any closing thoughts that you might want to express.
Well, again, I hope that what we've been able to kind of impart in this very short time is how different and unique UN CIMIC, despite the similarities in name, is from other forms of CIMIC, such as NATO or US or otherwise. So I think I hope we got that across, that it is important, and anybody working in the UN, and anybody in particularly the military component and working in CIMIC, I would really strongly suggest starting with this course. There may be, in short time, some other vehicles out there to help explain CIMIC, particularly when the Accord book is done later on next year. But it's important also to understand that, again, UN CIMIC is not just for the military. It is a coordination tool for the entire UN mission. So this is a course that can certainly be taken by civilians, particularly UN CIMCORD officers, of course, who are the natural partners of UN CIMIC officers, as well as UN civil affairs officers or people in offices like political affairs, NGOs, UN agencies, anyone who has any kind of work with the military, which they almost inevitably do. This is a good course for them because it explains things in ways that they can understand, and it doesn't, I hope, have all the military jargon. And to that end, I would add, UN CIMIC is not just about the things that we've talked about. It's not just about the democratic civil-military relationship. It's not just about the idea that the military is more supporting than supported. UN CIMIC is a process, just like any civil-military coordination. This is something that we're learning over time. And so therefore, it's a learning activity. And perhaps most importantly, CIMIC, or UN CIMIC, is about the future. And in that regard, I would certainly ask our student audience and anybody listening out there that if you have any comments or suggestions on how to make this course better, how to make it more relevant, how to make it more useful, how to make it work better for you wherever you are, please, please let us know, because we would certainly endeavor to work to make this a much better course for you as the months and years go on. So again, I thank everybody, and particularly the Peace Operations Training Institute and my very good friend Cedric DeConing, for this opportunity to put this course together and to launch off on this effort, and for the opportunity to speak with you all today.
Yes, Chris, and thank you. It's always my pleasure to work with you, to see you at various meetings, and to have you in this webinar today. And I'm glad you also mentioned your co-author, Cedric de Koning, co-author of the course. So once again, thank you very much, Colonel Chris Holshek. We appreciate your time, expertise, and your ongoing efforts for peace. And to our students and viewers, thank you for your excellent questions and for participating in this live webinar. This session will be archived on our website and available to students for future viewing. I am Harvey Langholtz, the Executive Director of the Peace Operations Training Institute. Thank you very much, and we look forward to your continued participation in our live webinar series.
Thank you for viewing this webinar. We are pleased to bring this webinar to you, and we invite you to view our website to see all the programs and courses we offer. If you would like to view the archived version of this webinar or any of our previous webinars, please visit www.peaceopstraining.org/webinars. They are also available on our YouTube channel. We thank our students worldwide serving on peacekeeping missions. The Peace Operations Training Institute is dedicated to serving you.